I want to talk about happiness, but I want to talk about happiness from a very different perspective. Happiness seems to be one of those words that has been written about and talked about and shared in so many ways in so many forums that I don't think that there's much I can do to add to the whole idea or the whole concept of finding happiness. I like to talk about a different aspect to happiness. And in many ways, I think that the pursuit of happiness for so many people is the reason why very few people are indeed happy in their lives. To an extent, there is this obsession we have today about being happy. Um, Anyone who studied neuroscience or who studied neurobiology has an understanding about how the human brain is designed and how the human brain has evolved over time. And one of the things that we should know about ourselves is how um, our physical biology works and functions. Now, one of the interesting things I learned when I started studying neuroscience was how the brain functions. I came across a quite interesting bit of literature that said that our brain is not designed to make us happy. And that's quite interesting in itself, that our brain is designed in such a way that its function is to try and look out for the best interest. And that, in many ways, means to preserve us, preservation. And so, what I'm going to be talking about in the next few minutes is perhaps a different twist to how you can actually live a good life. Happiness in itself, if that comes as a byproduct of how you live, then I think that's admirable. Happiness as a pursuit, I think that's something you may never get. One of my great mentors once said that if you pursue success, that it would elude you. The more you pursue it, the more it moves away. He said, but if you focus on becoming the kind of person deserving of success, that success will be attracted to you. It would attract itself to you. And I think that's such a great concept. And that simply means that you should take the focus away from trying to get something, trying to get happiness, and focus on trying to be the kind of person deserving of happiness. And one simple way that you can do that is simply to focus on living just one day. Just one day. And I'm going to share some ideas and perhaps some strategies or concepts that might help you focus on just how do I make today my masterpiece. You see, if you look at your life and my life are quite similar from the perspective that we have three parts to what we call our lifetime. Your lifetime comprises of the past, the present, and the future. For a number of years, I spent a lot of my time looking back towards the past. I did that simply because it was something that I was familiar with. There were memories I could go back to. And in many cases, some of those memories were not always serving me. Some of them were memories of successes, which is encouraging. But also some of those memories were memories of my failures, which, as much as you can, once you've learned the lesson of the past, you want to move on. You want to take the lesson so that you don't make the mistake again, but you don't want to dwell in the past. And I found that for a long time, I would always look backwards towards the past, sometimes for inspiration, sometimes simply because it was just a habit. Now, I did that for a long time, and part of the reason for that was because I hadn't actually come across the importance of having a vision for your life and the importance of setting goals. When I learned how to set goals, I realized actually that it was possible to design a future, and I didn't have to, rely on chance and luck. I didn't have to go through each day hoping that maybe the day will be good and maybe let's see what tomorrow brings. That I could sit down, I could ask myself a question such as, if everything worked out the way I wanted it to work out, what would I want to do and who would I want to be and where would I want to be? What environment would I want to be spending my time in? And just by asking these questions, I started to develop a desire. That desire fueled an ambition. That ambition helped me crystallize some of my ideas and thoughts in written form, captured in writing. I put a timeline to those ideas, and it became a goal. It became a vision that I could work towards every day. In many ways, if you've been through perhaps a rough past, and you've learned how to set goals, it's quite possible that you will spend a lot of your time designing and trying to write a new script for the future, simply because you're trying to run away from the pain of the past, and you're trying to embrace this, what you believe will be pleasure or excitement in the future. And so I transitioned. When I learned how to set goals, I transitioned from focusing on the past to focusing on the future. I became really intrigued by the idea that you could actually change your life by simply changing your ideas, and that you can become that person you wanted to be by acting like the person you wanted to be, taking steps every day and reminding yourself of the reasons why you wanted to be that person. And so I spend most of my time in the future. Now, this was a transition. I moved from looking backwards towards the past, and I started looking back forward to the future. That in itself is good, because in many cases, if you look towards your past, think about this: whatever you keep your focus on, whatever you focus on, that's where you tend to put your attention. That's where you tend to put your energy, and that's where your thoughts originate and start to crystallize. And there's a saying that if you sow a thought, you will reap a feeling. If you sow a feeling, you will reap an action. If you sow an action, over time you develop a habit. Those habits become behavioral. Your behavior determines your decisions. It determines your destiny, determines your future. So I found that by looking towards the past, that I was robbing myself, because my energy was looking backwards. I couldn't move forward. Suddenly, I learned how to look forward. Then I started focusing forward, that I forgot to just look down. And that's what I want to talk about, which is the present. Your lifetime comprises, like I said, of your past, your present, and your future. Your past has its function. It has a reason. There's a reason for your past. In many ways, your past will bring you some form of encouragement. If you've had successes from your past, I usually would say, capture those moments, store them in a really good, safe place, so that whenever you feel discouraged, you can look backwards to get inspiration, to get encouragement. Your future will give you hope. And wherever there's hope, you tend to find that people have opportunities and options to do things. Hope leads to motivation. Motivation leads to action. Action creates results. Results reaffirm your beliefs. So your future is important. But the present is where you find peace. And a life lived without peace is a failed life. A life lived without peace. And I'm talking about peace of mind. Now, I know that there's so many people all over the world who are suffering from lack of peace physically, and sometimes emotionally, and even sometimes mentally. But I read something that I thought was very profound. It was the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. He was a survivor in Auschwitz, the concentration camps, Nazi Germany, and he survived that ordeal. Now, if you haven't read about what happened during those times, I think it's really emotional, but also quite it instructs you on how to live well, and it shows you to some extent how we all have the possibility of doing extremely good things, but we also have that part of us that if we don't control, we can do really evil things. Now, Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. One of the most important statements he made in the book, he said that no matter how much they try to, suppress them, beat them up, they try to humiliate them, no matter how much they try to belittle them, punish them, some were killed. He said one of the things he realized from that experience is that they couldn't choose each and everyone's thoughts, that everyone still had the power of choice. You were still in control of the thoughts you allowed to flow into your mind. You had a choice. You could stand guard at the gate of your mind and effectively refuse to allow someone else's belief or thought become a dominant part of your existence, that they still had the power to choose what they were going to believe. And some of them held on to the thought and the belief that they would actually see the end of that experience, that they would see a better life, and that there was hope. And so hope is really important. So if you want to create a good life, if you want to create some form of happiness, and I don't like using that word too often because it can be somewhat misleading. If you want to find a purposeful driven life, if you want to have a purposeful driven life, one of the key things you have to learn is how to use your past, how to use your future, but also how to use your present. I'm going to share in the next 5 minutes how to use your present. How do you design and create one good day? You see, the mistake we make is we think that the future is somewhere distant in the ether. No. You see, today, as you're listening to me right now, today was the future that you called so many years ago. Who knows, maybe in 2009, you looked at 2019 as the future. But today is that future that you talked about in the past. Tomorrow is the future. Next week is the future. But as soon as we go from, 11:59 p.m. and the clock moves to 12 a.m., we're in the next day. And when we get to tomorrow, what we tend to do is rename the new day as today. So we are only ever living in one day. Nobody can live in 2 different days simultaneously. You can only live in one day. And so one of the things we all have to learn how to do is, how do we design one great day? How do we design a masterpiece of the day? Make it the best that we can make it. And here is the reason for this. If you can design, create one good day and live that good day to the best of your ability, if you can do that, and if you can repeat that the next day, make corrections, because I like a statement that I learned from Brian Tracy so many years ago. He said, at the end of every day, ask yourself 2 questions. What did I do right? What could I have done differently? Very powerful. What did I do right? So that you can reaffirm to yourself that you're doing a good job. By doing that, your brain releases dopamine and endorphins. Is that feeling of importance. You start to get that feeling that I'm doing the right thing. What did I do differently? That's where wisdom is found. Because you see, if you do what you've been doing every day, you're going to get what you've been getting every day. To do well and to do better, you have to change something you do daily. The secret to your future, the secret to that life you want, the secret to the happiness perhaps you're seeking, if you want to use that word, happiness, is hidden in what you do every day. Your rituals, your habits create what we call paradigms, meaning they create a culture of how you live in every single day. And that culture, that what I call paradigm, that habits, those routines, ultimately decide the results you get. So the key thing in finding a peaceful life, finding a purposeful life, finding some form of happiness or joy, really comes down to making a selective choice that you're going to focus on just one day. Now I want you to try this. Starting tomorrow, I want you to just focus on just one day. Now to do that effectively, I'm going to give you steps, show you what you have to do so that when tomorrow comes, you can execute on those activities and actions that you've identified. And that at the end of the day, you'll be surprised. You'll be astonished as to how that day is markedly different from the prior days or the previous months or the previous years. Whatever you seek, and I learned this, and I'm still learning this, whatever you're trying to seek on the outside, you will never find it. Because whatever you seek, it's within. The great writer and the great teacher said that the kingdom is within you. Whatever you're seeking is within. And the 2 ways I found in my life that I try to live. I find one a little bit easier. I find the other much harder. The first way is I live from the outside in. And that simply means that I rely on my sensory faculties. I should say this, the mind has 2 functions. You have what's called the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. You can live from the outside in, and that simply means that you react to everything that happens. You allow your outside world to dictate and tell you how to feel and how to live. You use your sensory faculties, sight, sound, smell, touch, taste, and you use those sensory faculties as what I call inputs into how you're going to behave. Information comes in through the sensory faculties, you process the information, and it dictates how you're going to feel. So someone walks up to you on the road and says, and bumps into you and says, what a twat, and walks off. That is information coming from the outside. Now, your visual faculty, sight, has registered the person's face. Your auditory faculty, your ears, have picked up on the sound, the tonation, maybe the aggressiveness in their voice. That information is put into your mind. That changes how you feel. Suddenly, you feel perhaps not too important. You feel intimidated. You feel saddened. You feel upset. You feel mad. Who knows, whatever emotion you might feel. And that affects how you go about the rest of your day. Maybe 4 hours after that, if someone were to walk up to you and say, how are you? Maybe you're a little bit defensive or aggressive in your response. Why? Because there was an input from the outside earlier on that has dictated how you're going to live. Now, this is how most people live their lives. I did that for a long time. Sometimes I still do it because we're human beings. You've got to be really, really honest. The second way that I started to learn how to live was from the inside out. And that simply means that you use what's called your intellectual faculties. Your intellectual faculties are the faculties of your mind. There you have your intellect and your emotions. Now, your emotions are controlled by your intellectual faculties. I'll give you a good example of how this works. But first, let me tell you what these intellectual faculties are. I talked about your sensory faculties, conscious faculties. I said it was sight, sound, touch, smell, taste. Your intellectual faculties are the faculties of your mind, what we call your mental faculties. Those faculties comprise of perception, intuition, imagination, your memory, your willpower, your conscience. There's so many of them. Those make up what we call your intellectual faculties, your inner faculties. Now, I'll give you a good example of how this works. I can ask you to close your eyes right now and to think about someone that you really, really love. Now, that could be your mother. And I can ask you, with your eyes closed, to remember or to bring to the screen of your mind the picture of your mother's face or someone you love. As soon as you do that, one of the things you might find is that your heartbeat, your heart rate suddenly changes. If it's someone you really love, your heart rate will become a little bit less aggressive. It'll become a little bit more stable. There'll be this lowering of your heart rate because you've found peace. That picture of your mother's face in your mind suddenly is starting to arouse emotions in you, emotions of love and happiness and joy, because there's a nice feeling you have associated with your mother. Now, by doing that, your feelings have changed in that instant. Now, how is it possible that you're listening to me, and even whilst you were listening to me, I bet if you were thinking about someone you loved, you would have noticed that whilst you were listening to me, you were also thinking or processing the picture of someone you loved. How is that possible that you can take just an idea, a thought in your mind, and suddenly the way you feel has changed? The reason is simply because now you're thinking from the inside out. You're not allowing the external world dictate to you how to feel and how to live. You're choosing from within to live out. So that is one simple way. And I struggle with both. I tend to find that some days I wake up in the morning and I react. I look at the weather, or I say it's not going to be a good day. Now, you've got to realize whenever that's happening, because as soon as you do that, you're saying, I'm living from the outside in. On the other hand, you could wake up in the morning, the day doesn't look so great, but you said, you know what, this is going to be one of the best days I've ever had. And then you can give yourself reasons. You might say, today, I'm going to be grateful. Today, I'm going to show love. I'm going to smile to people who I see. You're intentionally choosing to live from the inside out. So you change your external world based on the external perception and the external feeling you have. Now, let's go back to what I was trying to share, which is how do you design and create a good day or the good life? I would say one of the key things you have to do is decide. Decide. You see, our life doesn't change as a result of chance or luck or good fortune. Our life changes based on our decisions. The quality of your decisions and my decisions will dictate the quality of our results. One simple way to change the quality of your results, in this case, the quality of your life, is simply to change the decisions you make. Now, the key thing to do is simply decide that I'm going to have a great day. That decision alone puts you in a position where I would like to think very few people ever get to. Most people leave it to chance. They think maybe there is someone out there who is looking after them, or someone out there who is looking out to ensure they don't find happiness. I don't care what that might be, but we tend to leave it to chance. Well, life does not get better by chance. Life gets better by choices and decisions. You have to decide. Now, I believe that there are no victims in life. We all are volunteers, because you see, the common denominator of every relationship, whether that be intrapersonal or interpersonal relationships, is you. In every relationship that is connected to your life, you're the common denominator. Therefore, for things to change, you have to change. You don't have to wait for something on the outside to change. You can decide, I'm responsible. I can't change the world, but I can change myself. I think it was I can't remember his name, but it was a great teacher who said, if you think the whole world is responsible for your misery and your pain, then you have to send the whole world to the psychiatrist. And I want you to just think about how difficult that would be. If you think someone else out there, something external, is responsible for your happiness or your sorrow or your pain, and you want to change that person so that you can have a better life, then you have to send that person to a psychiatrist. And that's really difficult. It's a lot easier to change yourself. And so the first step, if you want to create a good day, is simply decide. Now, once you've decided, the next step is then to create or design that day. One thing to try and do is don't try to make it perfect. Don't try to make it the best day. Make course corrections as you go along. I would say this, that every day, when you wake up, how you wake up, what you do when you wake up, what you do during the day, what you do before you go to bed really matters. Unfortunately, see, we weren't given a manual on how to live life effectively. We've had to learn. We course correct and we learn, and we course correct and we learn. But life in itself is meant to be good if you understand how life should be lived. So I think once you've decided to live a good life and you want to create a good day and you're ready to design that day, it's simply sitting down and making a conscious effort of saying, okay, well, how do I want this day to evolve? I know that there will be external changes. There'll be things happening around me that I can't control. But what I'm going to try and do is control what I can control. I saw this pictorial representation of two rings. Two rings, if you think about two rings like this, and on one ring it said, these are things that I cannot control. On this it says, these are things that I can change. And if you intersect both, what you have is a world where you have things I can't control, things I can change, and somewhere in the middle, the most important thing you have to do is focus on what you can control. And then whatever time you have left, maybe you can spend that little extra time on that middle where there's some intersection. So I would say, start the day with the intention. But it cannot just stop with the intention. This is what to do as you design the rest of the day. Happiness, joy, excitement, pleasure have to be intentional. Pain has a way of finding its way into your world. Pain will schedule itself in your daily activities. Some form of unhappiness, some form of bad news, some form of discomfort, some form of negative experience will find its way into your world. Your focus shouldn't be about trying to keep it out. What you should focus on is creating so much joy and excitement around what you do, such that what you're focusing on is so much in comparison to actually what's not right. Trying to keep all the bad away is what most people try to do. I want to keep every bit of sadness away from my life. That's not quite smart. Now here's what's interesting. You cannot create a good life by trying to keep out the bad things from coming into your life. The focus is wrong. You should focus on the good. Magnify the good. Maximize the good. Do it so much that the bad becomes pale, becomes so small in comparison to the good. That way, you can't even notice. Because whatever you focus on, like I said earlier on, that's what you feel. Wherever you focus on, your energy moves in that direction. Keep your focus on the good. The great writer Paul says that things that are good, things that are just, things that are praiseworthy, things that are excellent, things that are noteworthy, he said, think on those things. Now, he didn't say don't think about pain and don't think about bad luck. No. The instruction was you focus and you keep your mind on things that are good, things that are praiseworthy, things that are just, things that are excellent. You keep your focus on the good. You forget the bad. Now, one easy way of doing this is to understand how the day is formed and how pleasure and joy and excitement comes into your life. The mistake that I made for a number of years was I always used to think that there was only one way to find happiness or joy or success, and that was the destination. If I achieve this, I'll be happy. When I do this, I'll be happy. Very flawed. Very flawed. That only didn't make life harder for me, but it also caused me, in many ways, a loss of a number of relationships along the way, because you're always focusing on measuring the end to the point where you forget about the journey. Every day is like a journey. You have what's called the starting point, you have what's called the end point, but you also have what's in between. That's the journey. You have the start, you have the end, you have the journey. Now, joy and happiness and excitement comes in three parts every day. You have the joy that comes when you start the day. You have the joy that comes as you progress through the day. And then you have the joy that comes by ending the day. Now, that joy or that excitement or that positive emotion has to be triggered. It's self-created. You have to intentionally know how to create them. And I'm going to talk about some form of neuroscience and neurobiology because that's really useful. You see, happiness and that feeling of happiness can be self-induced. When you start the day, like anything you've ever tried, I'll use this as a good example. Let's say, for example, you have an idea, maybe a goal of, say, I'd like to run the marathon in 6 months. That's the goal. The moment you decide on that goal, the moment you've committed yourself, perhaps you've made your registration application and you've sent your name in, maybe you've made the payments, that is the start. There's a form of excitement and motivation and inspiration that comes to you. There's a joy that comes because you're starting. Now, every day after that particular day that when you've sent in the application, now you have to work. You've got to wake up every morning, go run, go to the gym, eat in a certain way. Now, you might do that for 2 months in preparation. Every day that you prepare, there is joy hidden because every day you're advancing towards the goal. Earl Nightingale said that success is the progressive pursuit and realization of a worthy goal. He said, if someone knows where they are and they know where they're trying to get to, and every day they're moving progressively in that direction, that is success. The progressive realization of a worthy goal or the worthy ideal. So every day as you push towards that goal, you're achieving small, what I call pints of success. Now, on the day of the race, you run. When you get to the finish line, that is success. Now, if for whatever reason you had a particular time lap that you wanted to run the race in, maybe I'd like to run this marathon in 2 hours, and you do it in 1 hour, 50 minutes, you're ecstatic, you're excited because you've achieved the goal. See, the mistake, however, is this, and I want you to think about how this applies to your day. The mistake that most people make, and the mistake that I've made so many times, and sometimes I have to stop myself and shake myself and say, you can't keep doing this, you've got to learn, is that we focus too much on the end. So if we run the race, if we start the application, and we train every single day, we execute every single step perfectly well. On the day, we get up, we go, we get to the start line, we run the race to the best of our ability. And we get to the finish line. And let's just say hypothetically, I finish the race at 2 minutes, 10 seconds. Many people lose happiness. Why? Because they didn't achieve they didn't achieve that goal of running the race in less than 2 hours. I should have said 2 hours. Say I do the race in 2 hours and 10 minutes. I get upset. The focus there is wrong. When you start the goal, the excitement and the joy that comes is short-lived. When you start the day, the joy and the excitement is short-lived. Once you wake up in the morning, yeah, let's go take on the day. Let's go make a dent in the universe. It's short-lived. At the end of the day, when you've achieved the goal, the feeling is short-lived. The reason for that is because we're designed to always be striving. There's a part of us that is spiritual, that is always looking to grow and expand and explore. So once we've achieved the goal, we get hungry. Our spiritual part says, I want more. And so when people achieve their goals, they usually say, is this all there is? So at the end of the day, we think, what a day, it's over. If you want to find happiness in life, and if you want to find happiness in a day, focus on the process, the journey, because that's the longest part of the whole process, whereby you can have what we call long-lasting joy. Joy can be found in what I call the experiences through the day that are often hidden. You walk down the street, you see a beautiful flower pot. Your role at that point is just to stop for 2 seconds and say, what a beautiful flower pot, and send it love and say, I hope you make someone else happy. You walk down the street, you get into a shop, someone is serving you, they don't look too happy. You say, listen, I think I love the way, or, you say sincerely, you pay them a compliment, you say something nice. You say, listen, I come in here every day, and every day I come in here, you have a nice smile, you have a friendly expression, and I just want to tell you, thank you. That could very easily change some person's experience. Maybe the person is going through a difficult time, and suddenly you've given them that boost, that appreciation. You've acknowledged their presence. By giving that, what you tend to find, it comes back to you. So the process, the experiences you have every day, in those experiences are hidden opportunities for joy. And in every single case, if you're trying to get, what you're trying to get eludes you. If you're trying to give, it comes back in many more ways. So the key to finding joy and happiness in a day is, as you go through the day, look at yourself as someone who will put happiness in other people's experiences. Look at yourself as someone who is a steward of happiness and joy and peace and excitement. And your role is to make every person you encounter, or make every place or environment better than it was before you came in. And that doesn't mean you want to go in and start cleaning. It simply means you bring into that environment, you bring into that relationship, you bring into that meeting, you bring into that experience, all of you, your presence, your focus, your happiness, your joy, and more importantly, your spirit. And that should be also connected with what I call the spirit of gratitude. Anyway,